Hi, folks. Welcome back to another Collider Connected. Today we have a very special guest with us, Gina Prince-Bythewood, who has Netflix's delightful The Old Guard. Well, delightful seems weird because it's pretty dark, but it is a lot of fun too. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you are able to squeeze a little rest into your holiday weekend.
No, but that's all good. This has been 2 years of my life, so I'm, both nervous and excited to put it out into the world.
Awesome. I didn't think that was likely, but I was holding out hope for you. Hopefully you'll take a little break after you get through this press tour, at least.
Big nap.
So pardon the sort of generic intro question, but there are so few opportunities for women to direct these sort of tentpole action features, and even less for women of color. So I'm curious, how did this come to you? And as a filmmaker who's been so intentional with what you've made over the last few decades, what was it that made you say, heck yeah?
I love action movies, and had always hoped that I would have my chance to move into this big sandbox and, kind of bring my aesthetic to the genre. But Hollywood has not always shared my enthusiasm. But then Wonder Woman happened, and Patty Jenkins rocked it and absolutely opened the door, a crack for some of us to muscle through. And I was very excited when Skydance sent me the script for The Old Guard. I was not familiar with the graphic novel, but I was with Greg Rucka and his work. I just loved his female characters in the graphic novel space. They just hit different, and so I was excited to read. And I just, within 5 pages, I was like, oh yeah, this is dope. And it was really, I got to the line, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on this, but the Andy, when she says motherfuck, after she knows that her cover's been blown, like, it just said so much to me, her exhaustion. I didn't know what was coming because I wasn't familiar with it. So I loved it. It surprised me, but I love the truthfulness and personal part of that line and that sentiment of someone who's just lost their purpose. And it felt like something I could connect to. Absolutely. And the story just kept continuing like that. I just fell in love with these characters who are, compelled to do good, but you've got to kill to do good, that kill one to save many. But what is the toll that really takes? And that there's this young Black female that has come into the world now, into this world. And so there were just so many elements to it that felt different. Joe and Nicky, their relationship, and all these things that, as I said, just kept surprising me, kept endearing me to these characters. And yet there were also these dope set pieces that I was excited just to read, and they scared me a bit, which is a good thing, because when you're scared, it makes you work harder of how am I gonna bring that to life. But all the elements were there, and I just dug the real groundedness of it and was excited to take it on.
So they came to you, and I'm curious, is that an experience you've had often over the years and you just weren't into the projects, or was that sort of a refreshing post Wonder Woman change of pace?
Certainly post Wonder Woman. I had a couple opportunities, but they weren't ultimately quite right. Like, I knew if I was going to jump into this big sandbox that I had to be passionate about the story. I mean, I love what I do, but it is really hard. And so I needed it to be absolutely right for me. And this felt right. But what was most exciting to me is when I got into that room, and that's what most of us really want. Just get us in the room, and then we're going to show you why, we can do this. But Skydance, they talked about Love and Basketball and Beyond the Lights, and what I brought to those characters and the depth to that. And that's what they wanted for The Old Guard. They wanted it to feel like an action drama. So the fact that those two films are what ultimately got me in the room, as opposed to the fact that I had 10 action films on my resume, which I did not. I love that. And I hope that is the direction that we're going.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, when it comes to staging these kick-ass set pieces, for something you ultimately know will be watched at home, either on a home television or a computer or a phone. Is that, I know, hopefully not, but we know the truth. Is that a consideration on a technical element when you're working out your set pieces? When Netflix entered the equation, were there technical discussions about how it would play differently for home?
No, and I never wanted to approach it other than this is a film. Partly going in, I knew we were going to have both theatrical and on Netflix, but I never wanted this to feel nothing less than a big action joint.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to making a big action joint, as we talked about, those opportunities for women and different voices have been very limited over the years.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, how much was a balance between honoring what you love and we all love about the greats of action cinema and bringing what people want from that to the table, while also embracing that you are the only person who could tell it this way, and it might not be a way people have seen before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I certainly, when I came aboard this, I went back to the movies that I love so much, but also I just did so much watching. A lot of Asian cinema who, there's so many great directors that are coming at action in a different way. You want to study what people have done that you love. The bathroom fight in MI6. Absolute template. That is a perfect fight scene. And so that was one of those things that in talking to my incredible stunt team, this is what I want to aspire to. The Raid is a movie that I love, and I love the action in that, the groundedness of it, the how personal it was. And, for me, that's the best kind of action scene, which is character driven. It has a story to it. It's emotional. And so I knew I wanted to bring all those elements to each one of the action sequences that we had. I wanted each one to feel different. And, in a lot of them, there's women at the head of it. And I wanted to make sure that I stayed true to the fact that they were women, that you couldn't just pluck out and put men in there. Like, let's be true to the character. Yet I never ever wanted anyone to question their abilities, their athleticism, the warrior mentality. And so much of that was approaching it in a grounded, real way, letting the actors know, this is how I'm going to shoot it. I really need you guys in this scene, as opposed to stunt doubles that I have to cut around real quick. Like, I want longer takes. I want the audience to see you. I want an audience to hopefully marvel at your athleticism. And I never wanted, like the plane fight, I never wanted anyone to watch it and say, oh, that was a sexy cat fight. Like, no, I want you to see women going toe to toe, because that's how I grew up. I'm an athlete, and I kickboxed for a couple years. I've been in a ring and been hit and hit others. Like, I want you to feel that, and I want an audience to believe the intent behind these punches and kicks, that it feels real. So, it was so much of that, of bringing the things that I know in real life into these scenes, and hopefully compete with some of those great scenes that I aspired to do.
Absolutely. And you worked with one of the foremost female action stars in the industry, and unfortunately one of the few at the moment who's being allowed to take on those roles, so to speak. But when you work with an actress who has made one of the greatest action movies of all time in Mad Max Fury Road and somehow survived that shoot, and then I won't lie and say I think Atomic Blonde is a perfect movie, but I think she gave one of the most technically perfect action performances of the decade. Mm-hmm. When someone's coming to the table with that level of skill, what did she bring to the equation? Did you learn things from her? What was her approach to really getting those action scenes to the level you wanted?
What it does for me as a director is, I know I can trust that she knows what it's going to take to be really good in those scenes, and will put in the work, because she's done it before. What George Miller did with Mad Max is, I'm so enamored with that dude's brain. Like, I love that film so much. But yeah, it was a level of trust, and knowing that it's one thing to say, hey, I want the actors to really do it. It's another for the actors to put in the work so that I can really have them do it and really tell the story. So that was great to have. And then KiKi Layne, who has never done anything remotely related to actions or stunts, be able to sit across from her after her audition, where I knew that she was Nile, but trying to impart to her how hard this was going to be. This is not those cool, sexy videos cut to music that you see actors put out after they've done an action movie. Like it is a lot. And I believed her when she said that she would do anything she had to do. And so for her to foremost train on her own to just start building up her body, but then working with Charlize, you know, she had an example to look to of how hard she had to work and what it takes to put in and building that trust. Because that's what it is when you're in a fight scene in the kind that we did, where the punches are coming with intent, like you're, you know, millimeters from somebody's face. That takes a lot of trust. And so that whole training process for me, and as I told KiKi, you know, that's part of your rehearsal. You are building character, and that's what Charlize was doing as well, building character in those intense training scenes.
It's really incredible that KiKi didn't have that experience, because she's never anything less than commanding. And those physical performances, sometimes you can tell they're not quite throwing the punch the way they should, you know?
Yeah, there's two tells, absolutely. Throwing a punch and running.
Yeah.
For women in these type of movies. So I had KiKi work with a running coach, and part of her just initial training was that throwing a punch. I needed, you know, you got to build that, because women, we don't grow up fighting like little boys do, you know, unless you're put into karate. So that was a big deal, making sure that her punches look real.
Well done. When it comes to, you know, sort of getting into the superhero genre, which is more or less is, you kind of got your feet wet in a way with Cloak and Dagger and the development process on Silver and Black. And I'm curious, what were the learning and the lessons that you were able to take from working on those projects that proved to be really useful this time around?
Oh, foremost, your team is everything. Your stunt team and your VisFX team, everything. And so I am, like, daily I would be like, thank God I have my team, Jeff Haberstad and Danny Hernandez, who designed the fights, and Bryson Counts. You need that level of folk who are helping you. It's like, I can tell this is what I want from the fight. This is the story of the fight. I need to see the choreography. I need to see, you know, these four characters who have been fighting together for centuries. They need to finish each other's sentences, so to speak, in these fights like that. How do I realize that? And for them to be able to give me something to then build on, and that back and forth of building a story through the physicality, through the action. If they were whack, then the action would be whack, you know? So your team is really everything. So that was a big one. And then really how just the specificity that you have to come in with a vision about the action. You have to come in knowing that you're telling a story with each thing. And that was something certainly that I learned with Cloak and Dagger. And then on Silver and Black, you know, and I'm sorry it didn't go, but that year and a half of developing it, I learned so much that I was able then to step into the old guard, as opposed to making that giant leap. It felt like, you know, a little less of a jump.
Yeah, definitely. Something we don't really hear the details a lot that I find interesting you just spoke about is how fight choreographers work with directors to, you know, achieve the maximum result. And I'm curious, in your the way you guys approached it. I've been on sets where it's a move at a time. They're getting one move at a time. I've been on sets where it's everyone knows their choreography like a dance. Mm-hmm. How did you guys approach it? And what is the interplay? Are they bringing you full sequences and then you work with your camera department? Are you going, I'm not sure about that hit? Or do you, it's their job to bring that to the table and then you shoot it?
And for us, and just specific to what we did, foremost it started with me sitting down and talking through the scenes, talking about the story of the scene, Let's use the kill floor as the example. I've got 4 characters who are using archaic weapons. How can we be believable in them defeating 16 mercenaries with modern weaponry? How can we believe that as an audience? And in thinking about it, I realized in the research that I did that the old guard are used to killing up close. That's how fighting used to be: hand-to-hand combat, sword, axe, up close killing. Whereas modern mercenaries were trained on the gun. You're shooting targets 30, 40, 50 yards away. It's very impersonal. And I felt like that moment of hesitation, if the old guard is running up on you and you're not used to that hesitation is what gave the old guard the advantage. And also having an axe like Andy's coming at you, I think would, freak you a little bit. So being able to go that deep into character and knowing that has to be reflected in the choreography, then Danny would with his stunt team and their stunt doubles, would come up with stunt viz and kind of, go through it. And then I would look at it, comment on it, I need more of this, or this move, I feel like that's a little corny. Can we do this? Oh, I think, Charlize looks better doing this kind of move. And we would just go back and forth and tighten it until we felt really good about it. Then share with the actors, make sure they're comfortable, and then how do we shoot it? And so for some of them, I storyboarded. Actually, everything I storyboarded, at least parts of it. And then the other was just understanding how to shoot it. So like the kill floor, 16 on one side, 4 on the other. How does it not look like, a mess? And what we did is we shot it in quadrants. And so like Joe and Nicky, they were one quadrant, and I would shoot all of them at the same time as all the other choreography was going on. Then we moved to Andy and then Booker. And so that was really helpful in terms of being able to get the specificity and give everyone their moment, yet still you're feeling that this whole thing is happening at one time. And from there, then I would get just specific moments I wanted. Andy pulling her axe, that's a dramatic moment. Joe blowing that dude's head off. Booker shooting out the light, which changed the lighting of the whole scene. So, it's absolutely a collaborative thing, but, starts with that initial vision.
That's awesome insight. Thank you for such a detailed answer. So I am now going to move into spoiler questions. If you have not seen the movie yet, go away, come back. You're going to want to see it just as pure as I did. But I absolutely do not want to miss the opportunity to talk to you about some really cool choices I think you guys made. So I will get the obvious one out of the way first. The very ending scene obviously presents itself as a setup for more. When you make a potential franchise starter like this with Netflix, how much is that part of the conversation in shaping the world that you're presenting and, the decision to end it that way? I know it's the way the comics end, but it certainly makes a statement.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. Foremost, you can never be presumptuous. Whether the story continues is wholly up to the audience if they want more. So, in going in, this is Greg's story. His characters, he always envisioned this as a trilogy. So there is absolutely more story to tell. And his new comic actually came out just a couple weeks ago. So, there is more story if an audience wants it. It's always a weird thing. You don't want to annoy an audience. So for me, it was, you have to start with this movie. We have to tell this movie, give it a beginning, middle, and end. There has to be a satisfying end to it. And honestly, in a theatrical, that would have been a tag. But Netflix, as soon as the movie's over, they're something is popping up telling you to watch something else. So we made the decision to make it part of the ending. Like we tried, and we were like, should we, hide it deeper in the credits? And then people who normally hit that, end out of the credits, will people start talking about, hey, there's just something else? But what, for me, I felt like the sequence with Quinn, for me, was really emotional, and like I cared about this woman caught in this horrible existence of drowning for 500 years.
It's the darkest thing I've seen in a really long time, by the way.
Like, you know, the psychology of that alone. Like, for me, I wanted to know what happened. So it is a hint of, okay, she's alive. So it was giving a hint, hopefully not having anyone feel like they're cheated of, you know, well, what happens next? I want you to want more, but again, it is wholly up to the audience.
What also kind of felt like Chekhov's Iron Maiden, like it had to come back.
I mean, you know, 500 years.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Finally rusted, yeah.
You know, you say obviously you want people to want more. Do you want more if the demand is there? Are you hoping to come back, or do you feel you've said your piece with what you have to say about these characters at this point in the press tour when you're exhausted?
Yeah, I want to see what happens on Friday and beyond. I hope an audience embraces this film and what I brought to it. I know that I love these characters so much. I know where the story's going, which is pretty great. So if nothing else, keep reading the comics because it's very cool. So I think I can better answer that once it's out in the world.
Very understandable. I'll tell you this. My mom and I are polar opposite consumers of pop culture. I am the research junkie. It's not just my job. It's a nerdy passion. I want to know everything about everything. She watches everything blind, does not care, has no idea who anyone is but the super famous people. She walked in about halfway through while I was watching my screener, sat down, never left. And then afterwards was like, well, I loved that.
Wow.
So I think it's going to have a good broad range.
I love that. All right.
Now to something I really liked about the ending. You frame it, you know, okay, this is a two-part question, I guess. First part's pretty silly, second part less silly.
Okay.
You frame it so that at the ending we do learn that if we don't know why, or if we don't know how, maybe we know why, which is that Andromache and this team are implementing change that is good for humanity.
Yes.
The silly question is for the super nerdy people, how cohesive and intricate is that board of information for people who want to still frame, create a timeline, go the whole 9 yards?
I and Greg and my incredible production team, Paul Kirby, production designer, his whole team, we were anal about that board. It had to make sense. And for that exact reason, we even said, if somebody freeze frames this and picks it apart, will it make sense? And it does. And it was fun to create that board. There were so many personal things in history and forgotten conflicts, or conflicts that are never talked about. We just wanted to infuse it. But one of the things that attracted me to the story is because it touches on a short story that I read when I was a kid by Ray Bradbury that I've never forgotten. And it was about this time machine, and you can go back, but you had to stay on the path. And this guy went back and he saw something and he went off the path to go see it, got in trouble, but got back on the ship, came back to the present, and everything was different and language was different and he couldn't figure out why. And then he looked at the bottom of a shoe and a single butterfly he had killed. And the fact that little death, that thing had ramifications. I've always been fascinated by that. And that's what I loved about the old guard, that they could save somebody and generations later, they have affected humanity, absolutely affected humanity. That was a fascinating, cool thing for me. And so that's why I love that board so much and wanted to make sure that it made sense.
Very wise. You know Reddit's coming for you. Westworld learned that the hard way. But the less silly question tied into that is, what sort of it meant to you as a storyteller, as a person who has this opportunity to make this movie that we don't usually get to see made. What did it mean to you to position a young Black woman who's now has that opportunity to shape the future of humanity?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, everything. KiKi and I talked about it a lot. The fact that we got to do that we got to put a young Black female hero into the world where we rarely get to see that, to see ourselves reflected in that way. It was everything. It's something that we as a community need to see, but the world needs to see that of us as well. And you know, the one of the best moments of this whole process was in one of the audience screenings that we had. You know, this woman in her 20s, Black woman, said she wished that she had this film when she was 12 and she could have seen Nile at 12 years old and what that would have meant to her. That's what filmmaking can do. That's why I'm an artist, to hopefully affect people, affect change. And so it means a ton.
Yeah, I was reading, obviously, some prep interviews before this, and you said something in one of them, or maybe it was the editorial you wrote for Variety, that I thought was really beautiful. You know, I talk about how Charlize is one of the few women who gets to make these types of movies, but she does get to make them. And you said something about how these young stars, these Black stars, don't really exist. You have to make a point to make space for it and create it yourself. That's not really a question, but I thought it was lovely.
No, thank you. It's you know, it's true. There, I think I used the term farm system, but it's true. There's not a development of stars in our community, and you know, that's in Hollywood. That's what gets films made, is having stars that are green lightable, and the only way to do that is to create stars, and it's exciting to me. I love working with young actors and discovering new talent, and I feel like I have a talent for it. I feel stuff in my gut, and I'm proud of, you know, these women that have been given a platform. And, you know, I just hope for great things for KiKi. Certainly her choices have been amazing. Beale Street to, you know, to then the Old Guard to Coming to America too. Like, how dope is that? You know, Gugu and her beautiful trajectory, and Sanaa, who I just always want to work with and just haven't had the opportunity to work as much as we'd like. But it's exciting to find new talent and foster new talent. And it really is, you have to be intentional with it, because not everyone in this industry are looking to do that.
You mentioned two of your previous leading ladies, and I have to say that I consider Love and Basketball and Beyond the Lights two of the best love stories of the 21st century. I know technically the 21st century isn't until 2001, but I'm not going to go with that. When it came to watching this, the second, you know, you see Nicky and Joe, I'm like, oh, that's it. That's that love story again. That's the thing in her filmmaking that gets me so much. And it's beautiful and bold and everything the audiences have been asking to see, instead of these disposable husbands that are in one scene and can be cut out for China, things like that, you know? It's a very beautiful, bold statement that as a queer person, I felt very empowered and touched by. So I'm curious about your approach to lacing that rich of emotionality, romance, and queerness into a space that does not usually make room for those things.
Yeah, it was one of those things, as I said, that surprised me when I read the script, and I loved Nicky and Joe. And I felt like, God, we haven't seen this. And in the same way that KiKi and I talked about the importance of seeing ourselves as heroes, it was the same thing with Nicky and Joe, the opportunity to do that. And but it started with these two people, just their characters. If you just think about it, these two men who you know, fell in love during the Crusades, and you know, back then there was a time in our history where homosexuality, it wasn't a thing. It was just out there. It was just love is love, truly love is love. And then through the centuries, through the years, that religion and governments have so corrupted people's thinking and weaponized it, and and now suddenly, finally, hopefully, step by step, coming back to love is love. And it was just so much that both Luca and Marwan, the two actors that we talked about just the depth of what their relationship was, the depth of their love, what they've been through. But Marwan too, he was so excited about that speech, and like, I think anybody would love their significant other to say that. And it was certainly in the graphic novel. It was very important for Greg when he sold it to Skydance to make them promise that that would stay in it. And that was when I came aboard. It was like, this is why I'm here. Like, you don't have to worry at all. But to see the way the audience, the test audiences embraced the relationship, that there was literal applause in the middle of the theater, in the middle of the screening when the kiss happened, that says a lot to me, that is being embraced. And I think because it was just in the same way I wanted to normalize Andy and Niall as, these female warriors, I wanted to normalize Nicky and Joe. I didn't need to make a big production out of it. It was just, as you said, and I'll steal that, but it was just woven into the narrative. It was just part of it. It was part of the grounded, real thing. And, I love that scene. I love those two characters, and I love what the actors brought to it.
Oh my God, they're so good. It's really beautiful, and really did move me in the middle of this like moment where you're like, fuck yeah, hit him. Oh, it's beautiful. I know I'm almost out of time with you, but if it's okay, I'd like to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's very clear that you have a strong affection for the source material, and it's what brought you on board. But a lot of filmmakers will talk about, sort of massaging the script once it's in their hands, and, what they bring to it. Was there a Gina pass? And if so, did it result in any major formative changes to what we ended up with?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, though I do want to start with, I love Greg's graphic novel, and it was my Bible throughout the entire process. I carried it with me everywhere. Certainly when I've written adaptations and directed, that source material, I'm here because you created this. And I don't believe in using someone's source material as a blueprint. Like, this is my Bible. I fell in love with it because of what you brought. And then he adapted the screenplay, and that rarely happens in this space. And he did a beautiful job. For me, it was really two things that I wanted to push in the, add to the film, which Greg was absolutely open to. And foremost was Niall. Just expanding her character, giving her a full backstory, a full arc, making sure she was integral to the climax, to the plot, and really elevating just her feelings about her family and what that would mean to give up her family. So that was, one of the big things I would say that was added when I came aboard. And then the thing about killing and the toll that killing takes on somebody. Given this is an action film, it's absolutely violent, but I never wanted it to feel like a celebration of violence. And to do that, I wanted to be grounded with it and real with it, and touch on things that we don't always see in action films, which is killing is not easy. And certainly for Andy, who has been compelled to kill for good, but that's thousands of kills that she's had to do. I want to know that affected her. And Niall, who kills her first person, in service of becoming an immortal, that has an effect on her. I felt like that was a real thing, given these are true soldiers, and would give some depth to it. But also I felt it was a very good connective piece between the two women, that would help them, bring them together, and ultimately Andy helping her understand why they have to kill.
I'm curious, as a quick follow-up, was there any pushback at all to really, okay, so we see that action scene sort of a lot where the one-man army tears up a room full of soldiers, faceless, casualties, and it's a yeah thing. Was there any pushback to reframing that with a real human cost and a question of the morality of something like that?
Thankfully, no. thankfully, yeah, I was so strong. I just felt so strongly about it and really made it as part of my pitch when I got the gig. And thankfully it was embraced foremost by Greg, but by everybody.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for giving me your time today.
Thank you very much.